Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om. Allah.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and today we're speaking with Rosslyn Ives, who's a humanist and an editor of several humanist magazines in Victoria. Thanks for coming in, Rosslyn.
My pleasure, Norm.
In order to set the scene, do you mind if I read from the front of the brochure from the Humanist Society of Victoria, which is a brief description of what it might mean to be a humanist? And that it goes like this: to support human diversity, human rights, and the well-being of all humanity using only human capabilities. Is that a satisfactory description of your understanding?
It is, yes. I guess we could have added and accumulated human knowledge, but you can only put so much when you're trying to give a summary.
Yeah, that's right. So the accumulated human knowledge would be in the human capabilities. That's where that would be?
Yeah, I think we would think of capabilities as what skills and capabilities people have as an animal. I mean, dare I say it like that?
Yes. No, well, that's.
I mean, using language, using intelligence, having culture, having patterns of social behaviour, things like that.
Yeah, okay.
Would be capabilities.
Okay, well, we'll later on we'll go more into humanism.
Fine.
But can we just trace your history as to the pathway that you followed to become a humanist? In our earlier conversation, you were born into a Church of England family, which was not really very churchy. How was it?
Well, at the time I grew up, and we're talking about the 40s and 50s, it was pretty usual for really everybody in the neighbourhood to belong to some religion, even if it was a nominal thing. And so we were Church of England, and off I was packed to Sunday school, and with the family, and more with my mother, we would go to the services, usually the important ones through the year. So that was my introduction to being Church of England.
Did you have any sort of childlike connections with religion per se? Was there something which grabbed you?
Not really, no. No, I never felt overly connected. It just was part of what you acquire as you grow up. And the little church that we went to, St George's, also doubled as a school, not a school hall, but a community hall. And it had a great big painting or fresco or something up at the front, but it was like a biblical scene. And you know, when you're growing up on a riverside suburb in Perth, you don't identify with it yourself. You kind of know it's somewhere from the past.
So there was no real connection. Did you go to, I forget what they used to call it in the church, but the young kids used to go to a sort of almost like a kindergarten?
No. Sunday school, yes. And that's where you got stamps which repeated these, you know, the biblical type of representations of what I now realise would be Middle Eastern sort of looking people. I never took it very seriously. No.
Right, so there was no great connection. So as you evolved, did you go to a church school or a state school?
No, I was at a state school. And when we were in our final year in the state school, they collected up all the Church of England students and offered us confirmation classes. Right. Which, being a serious little sod, I sort of took very seriously because this was clearly an important step, I thought. Not a lot of it made a lot of sense. and I said to myself, well, after you're confirmed, then it will make sense. And sadly, it didn't.
Yes. So the confirmation, what did that look like? You had those sort of introductory lessons?
We had a series of lessons. Look, it's such a long time ago. I imagine they were once a week, and I felt it probably went over a whole term or something. You know, was quite a series. And then we all got to go into St George Cathedral in the centre of Perth for the confirmation, and they must have brought a whole lot of us in for that confirmation ceremony, which is still, you know, I don't remember that either very much.
Okay, you obviously this was an important thing to the Church of England, but it hadn't engaged you particularly.
No, not really, no, it hadn't.
So what happened then?
Well, what happened then is I then went off to high school, and well, of course, it was just a state high school, so there was no religious component except for a rather interesting cleric who used to front up from time to time and entertain us with stories, mostly about running rugby clubs and things. It was a bit strange. He coached the rugby, and I think he perhaps thought that would kind of hook people in or side.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, but that was our little touch of religion. And somewhere along the line in my first 2 or 3 years at school, I acquired information about evolution, and this was like, oh, this is amazing. You know, I really like this story. And that seemed to offer me an explanation of where we'd come from and who we were and what sort of beings we were. And I really just pretty well thought, well, not getting anywhere with the C of E.
No.
So I think I don't need to really... And my father was not religious, so that it wasn't that easy to kind of slide out of being involved.
So you'd started to have a foot in two camps in a way. Was it at that point?
Oh yes. I mean, I did continue to go to what you'd call youth activities, because in those days the churches ran the most likely gathering of young people that you could find. Right. I mean, it was a social activity. So I wasn't going to miss out on that.
No, of course not. But something else we can't miss out on either is running out of time. So we'll go for a break. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and today we're speaking with Rosslyn Ives, and she's a humanist, and she also is the editor of several humanist publications. Before the break, we were talking about you having a foot in each camp, where the C of E had influence in your life, and you discovered evolution, and that was starting to provide you with some answers. How did it roll on from there? Well,
I finished my secondary schooling and went to university to do a science degree. And it was at the university I discovered in the library the anthropology section, where it gave accounts of different peoples around the world, and I just found that so fascinating. It was like opening up something I knew nothing about, of how varied human groups were. So I guess that really did undermine my whatever lingering adherence I had to the C of E, and I probably pretty much went into the non-believer or atheist camp at that point.
Right.
Not in a mad, passionate way, but I just more or less left religion behind.
Right. Yeah.
And then I subsequently married, and my husband and I, we moved here to Melbourne because he'd got a job here, and I had a child. And then after that I went science and biology teaching.
Okay, right. which tends to bring you face to face with some of the issues that Christians encounter, and you found that the system, the science, actually answered the questions more convincingly for you.
It did for me, yes, it did. It did. But I didn't. I wanted to be fair to religion, if you like, and I must have seen an ad somewhere by the Catholics for a course on Catholicism,
Yes.
which I subscribed to, and I read through all that very diligently, and but I wasn't convinced. But I did tell them in the end that, look, you know, if I was going to be a Christian, I would be a Catholic.
Well, that's interesting. What made you make that observation that you did?
Oh, well, you'd want to be the big one, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I see. yes, and well organised too.
Well organised and
yes.
colourful and a long history, and you know, C of E were just a little spin-off, as I'd learnt by then.
Yeah, you're starting to get into dangerous territory. Yeah, but I understand.
I don't mean it unkindly,
no, I understand. But well, okay, we're becoming a humanist, and obviously you became one fairly seriously.
Yes, in a sense, I mean, I still wanted to live a good life, and a good life in a good, in an ethical, responsible way, and I'd pretty well worked out, well, you could kind of do it yourself. You didn't have to have a religious attachment for that.
Right. Right.
And so there I was, you know, wandering about in life, teaching and doing all sorts of other things. And a bit further down the track, I did separate from my husband, and later on met my really the love of my life, who's been my partner ever since.
Yes.
And he was a passionate rationalist.
Oh, okay.
So
yes.
he'd been involved with the rationalists since his university days, and was a great advocate for them. And through my association with him, I started to go to rationalist activities.
Yes.
But alongside the rationalists, many of the people who went to those activities were humanists or humanist society members.
Okay.
And I ended up deciding that, on balance, the humanists were a nicer bunch of people. And so I joined the humanists, and that would have been in the late 1980s, and got increasingly involved with their activities.
What was it about the humanists, apart from them being nicer people, but obviously there was more than that, what was it about humanism which whetted your appetite and decided? Now
that's a hard one to answer. I mean, I can answer it from now, but at the time it was more that I found the group more congenial.
Okay, right.
And they did submissions, they supported various charity type activities, and I thought that was a good thing. The rationalists weren't that way inclined.
Right, right.
So, you know, that seemed the right way to go. And then as I got more involved with the humanists, I then started to read a lot more about humanism, and that just reinforced my, you know, my belief, or belief's the wrong word, but my conviction that it was the right position for me. I only mean it in a light sense.
Yes.
It's a tricky word, humanist or humanism.
Yes.
I mean, they've got a long history, and I've gone back and looked at that. But I see the humanist position as having a connection right back to the ancient Greeks, where philosophers argued about what's the best way to live, and they did so from a human-centred point of view.
Yes.
It was like, we humans, we've got to do the best we can, sort of thing. And those early Greeks and their writings were picked up by the Romans, and they, you know, they then sort of had a reasonable kind of sense of how you might live, or some of them did, not all of them. And it was those ancient Greek and Roman writings that were picked up again in the Renaissance, when humanist, or the word humanist, started to be used.
Yes.
Meaning people that studied the works of man, focused on man, as opposed to focused on God.
Okay. And with your education pathway, that would fit well over a science degree. Does that?
To some extent, yes. I mean, my passion in life is the biology, which I taught.
Right.
But when you get to teach biology, you also invariably teach general science to the lower forms at the secondary level. So you have to kind of cover all of science.
Biology involves evolution. Evolution involves time, and we're out of time, so we'll go to a break. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and today we're speaking with Rosslyn Ives, and she's a humanist. She's also the editor of several humanist publications. Okay, we've gone through the Church of England, we've gone to university, we've got the science degree, we're teaching science and biology, and we're a humanist. Did God ever pop up in there in a way which sort of caused you to say, well, where are you, God, in my life? Did God ever play a part for you?
Not really, because the God I was introduced to years ago when I was a child was the sort of white man with the beard floating up there, you know, sort of thing. And I mean, it didn't take me long when I read more and got a bit more mature that was a totally ridiculous notion.
Yeah.
So whatever God was, it wasn't that.
Wasn't
that at all. If there was a God. And my current view would be that God is a human construction. One that obviously for many people is deeply meaningful.
Yes.
But for people like me, it's like, hang on, what's going on over here?
Well, as a humanist, you can accommodate comfortably theist perspectives, is that right? There's this...
Not that I would identify with them, but I mean, I don't have any trouble with people who are believers. In fact, a very close friend is an ex-nun. And we get on like, you know, house on fire.
Yes.
We, you know, really get on well. Go out to dinner, have a few glasses of wine.
Yeah, that's more the point I was making, is if there's not some wall between...
No.
Humans are much more embracing than that.
No, we understand, well, my understanding, which I think is a pretty common humanist understanding, is that religion is something that's deeply meaningful to people and fulfills a very important role for many, many people. But I would still view it as something humans have put together over the years. But if that matches with people's needs and their sense of community and meaning in life, that's fine. As long as they don't want me to go on board.
That's right. Can I take you to a place which is a big issue, say in America, for example, is the argument with design and evolution, between design and evolution. And as a biology teacher and having the science background, sorry to pop that question on you, but what's your view on that?
Well, I guess off the top of my head, what I'd like to say is that the natural world is self-organising. And while when you look at the wonderful sort of plants and animals, they look designed, it's that they're self-organised and they work on that basis. And the design is like an invalid question, I would say. Right.
So that's how you manage the involvement of God in that design. Is there's organising, but it's self-organising.
It's self-organising, yes. So you don't need a God in my perception of things.
And particularly if you're looking at time spans of millions of years. Yes. I think that's the slice, isn't it?
I mean, the thing is that the humanist position that I understand, and I think it's pretty widely held by humanists, is that we're on our own. We get one life we just got to do the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't think that there's a supernatural spiritual dimension.
Or there's any need for one.
For us,
No.
For us, no.
And hence coming back to the definition once again of the support of human diversity, human rights, and well-being of all humanity, using only human capabilities.
Yeah.
So, as you said, we're basically on our own, and we should do the best with that. Now, that comes across to the Humanist Society. It's a worldwide movement, isn't it?
It is indeed.
It's strong in some places.
In some countries, the membership is very large, like the two that spring to mind are Norway and the Netherlands. They have tens of thousands of members.
Oh, really?
And it's a whole historical thing. I'll tell you something else that is worth noting. The international humanist movement was formed after the Second World War, when, in a sense, there was a sort of moral crisis because of what had happened during the Second World War with the Holocaust and those sorts of things. And people who were in humanist groups, ethical groups, atheist, rationalist groups, started to correspond and said, look, we've got to go a different way. We need an ethical, secular alternative. Okay. And they called a conference with representatives from around the world in 1952 in the Netherlands, where else? And they then agreed to form the International Humanist and Ethical Union, great mouthful, and the position that they would hold would be humanism.
Yes.
And from that, groups either changed their name or formed as humanist groups, and that's when the groups formed in Australia.
Okay.
And after that.
So the word that pops up, which has disappeared in the title now, but is ethics. Is it prominent?
Well, the International Humanist and Ethical Union still has ethics in its title,
right.
And there are groups in different countries that do call themselves ethical organisations. So it is still, and we do consider ourselves, and it's very important that to have an ethical position.
Yes.
That's deeply important.
It is deeply important, and it's a sort of issue that I'd love to discuss with you further. Would you be able to come back next week?
Possibly. We could arrange a suitable time.
That will be really good, because there's lots of things we can discuss there on the ethical issues and the background of humanism, and some of the things which happen in Australia in the name of humanism.
That'd be fine.
Thanks very much, Rosslyn. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week, and we'll be speaking again with Rosslyn Ives about, in greater detail, of what humanism does in Australia. Thank you for watching.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allah.